specifically, can you share a little bit about the work that you all do, but more importantly, the vision, right, that you're hoping to realize through that work, and maybe a little bit about how it got started?
Thank you, Chinyere. So, like Chinyere said, I'm Dr. Abisoye. I'm actually a physician who got interested in education in Nigeria. Because as I've traveled across the country, one of the things that has struck me were two things. One was just the number of children that you find on the streets, particularly in the north, that are out of school. And these are children that are in abject poverty. To get a meal a day is a big deal. And the other thing that struck me was the fact that even where the children are schooled, that there are a lot of schools that are really subpar. And they're subpar in the quality of the structure that the children attend, subpar in the quality of the education, and that's where Text Foundation was birthed. So basically, Text Foundation has a goal to improve both access and quality of education. And we do that through two main streams. The first is by improving access to education. So we have a radio school program, which is now basically a boombox school program that that teaches children that are out of school numeracy and literacy. So that's, basically numeracy and literacy. What we did was to take an out-of-school program, curriculum, and have a producer develop it into a drama series that could be aired on radio. And so the children would listen to this and don't really realize they're in school. And they have a workbook that they complete. They have a facilitator that works with them to complete this. Last year we had 56,000 children enrolled in the program. Our focus at the time was on output. They improved their literacy and numeracy by 40%. And this year we're looking at outcomes, not just the output, but how do we really improve their lot? So for example, we know that these children don't have a meal a day. So one of the things we added was food for the children. So they actually come in, they're fed, and they have a uniform. They have a sense of belonging in the community, and really that's what we're trying to do at the end of the one-year program, is to ignite the desire to learn in them, and is to help them build self-confidence and just be able to see themselves as being productive and members of the community. So Text Foundation also improves quality of education. We do that through our schools. So we have 3 schools in different parts of the country, one in Lagos, one in Kishi, which is in Oyo State, and one in Sokoto. And the schools are STEAM-based schools. They're based on science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And these are children from very underserved communities, very poor families. So we bring them in to give them, first-class education. They're learning coding, they're learning robotics, things that they would never have, been exposed to. And they're learning how to talk. We teach them about public speaking and those sorts of things. So at the end of the day, we want these children to graduate. It's not just about memorizing the information, but it's about critical thinking. It's about thinking, looking at things in a whole different way. We have interactive boards in all the schools, so the children are really able to get a technological feeling to what they're doing. So anyway, that's Text Foundation in a nutshell, and looking forward to talking to whoever wants to hear more about it one-on-one. Thank you.
I work with MTN. MTN Foundation was established in 2005. It's funded solely by MTN. MTN normally will donate 1% of its profit after tax to the Foundation. And the foundation does a lot of things across Nigeria. In some parts of Nigeria, the only evidence actually of governance that they see is MTN and its foundation. We provide everything: water, we grant scholarships, we build out health centers, and we support women entrepreneurs. We have a whole bouquet of services. Right now we are trying to pivot to just remain digital. What we want to do is to focus on digital skills for digital jobs. We've been trying to do that for 2 years. It's a bit difficult to do because there's so much that needs to be done in the country from a basic point of view, from getting food to people to getting them water to supplying electricity and all sorts of things. MTN Foundation will be 20 this year. We'll be celebrating that hopefully in October or November. From a governance point of view, the foundation has an independent board chaired by some of the very prominent, very well-known Nigerians. I'm sure the Nigerians that are here will know Auntie Mo, who used to be chairman of Access Bank. She's on that board. Prince Julius, who was former minister, is on that board. I was on the board myself, but I'd served my tenure and I've left. So from an introduction point of view, that's MTN Foundation. Right now we're looking for partnerships. We're finding that what we do requires people coming together with us and working with us to be able to scale it even more than it is right now. So recently we partnered with Vision, Primary Health Care Alliance, which is, I think is led by Imoke and his team. And we're looking for other partnerships. You provide the funding if what you want to do makes sense, and we'll scale and we'll add value to Nigerians, and we'll partner with you to move it forward. Thank you.
My audio is still on. Is it? No. Hello. No.
We're gonna do the mic pass. Okay, so one thing that you heard from each of them, right, is a bit about their work with young people. And I think we talk a lot about the demographic, the dividend, right, with the number of young people on the continent, but we need to actually focus on how we're developing children. And so you need organizations like this doing that kind of work, because if we don't have that, we end up with a risk that we'll have a lot of young people who aren't in a position to take on the future of what work looks like, the future of what jobs look like. So it's really important to have organizations like this and the kind of work that they're doing. What I wanted to talk about next was each of you also focus a bit on mindset changes and shifts and behaviors. So in addition to teaching them skills about chess or teaching them education, MTN has a series of initiatives underneath your foundation. Part of what you all focus on is about the mind. So can you talk a little bit about what kind of work you do with young people as it relates to that level of work, how you're changing young people's minds, because that is what actually empowers them to think a lot differently about the way that they see the world, about the way that they see themselves in the world, and that's something that can be applied in so many other spaces. So starting with you.
Maybe it makes sense to highlight the story. So some 3 years ago, we decided to do a new project. And I'm going to give some more context for those that do not live in Nigeria, in Lagos. So there's a place in Lagos called Oshodi Under Bridge. And this place is notorious for one thing. It's a criminal hotspot, one of the most dangerous ghettos in the country. You find a lot of thugs, you find a lot of children as well. Mostly, homeless, rebellious kids, orphans, and you see them just doing a lot of menial jobs to survive. Children, really. And you see the much older thugs. So in Lagos, we call them area boys. And it's such a hard problem to solve because in the neighboring states, because of the extreme poverty in neighboring states, young people leave their homes and they come to Lagos hoping for better opportunities. But very quickly they get to find out that there's almost no place for them in that society. So they take to the streets. And on the streets, you need to live a life of survival. So that has created a huge problem where you have thousands of homeless children. And these homeless children become get older, they lose a lot of their innocence and become the thugs. And those thugs become tools in the hands of politicians, and maybe give them some money to go and, snatch ballot boxes and disrupt elections. So it's a serious problem in Lagos. And I remember one of those days, I was traveling past that Oshodi. I was driving past that Oshodi on that bridge. And a kid walked up to me and asked me for money. And I didn't have any money. So you know how you're trying not to maintain eye contact, because you don't have any money to give them. And I just drove off. But I couldn't stop thinking about that child for a long time. And the following week, I had another experience there. But this time, it wasn't a child that walked up to me. It was an actual thought. And he had stones in his hands, and he was trying to break the window, And thankfully, the traffic cleared, and I moved, And maybe some of us have been in that situation a couple of times, right? And I couldn't help but imagine that there was a transition that happened. That child would evolve, would lose his innocence, and become that thug. And that thing that he was asking you while begging, he wouldn't have to ask you. If you had a gun or a knife, he would get it from you with force. And I thought about what I could do in that situation, because it was such a complex problem to solve. Because now you're not just working with children in low-income communities, you're working with very vulnerable, young, rebellious children that have spent a large chunk of their lives trying to survive in the streets. And we went there with a couple of chessboards. And I remember, we were immediately accosted by the much older area boys. And I told them that, I wanted to come and start teaching them chess for some time. And they didn't know what chess was. And they asked that, was it going to give them money? I said, no, but I just wanted to spend time teaching the kids. And they're like, okay. So we started, we came, and for the next roughly 7 months, we were there almost every day teaching those kids under the bridge, chess, mental maths, basic literacy and numeracy for the ones who couldn't read and write. And a lot of things happened in that time. And for those that followed, on Twitter, because I did document a lot of the stories, we could see the transition literally from 0 to 1. And just to track it back to the question that you asked, it was such a phenomenal success story that one of the most dangerous ghettos in the country became a classroom for those children to learn. And all of that experience helped about 60 of them find their place in the world again. We taught them chess for some time, and at the end of it, we had a tournament. And the tournament was epic. In fact, people came from all over the world to sit under the bridge with those kids. I remember the Deputy High Commissioner of the Canadian Embassy came. People came from CNN because they couldn't believe that such children, a lot of them could barely read and write, would show great aptitude for chess in all its complexities. And they played at a very high level of that. Very high, close to master level. And that was super impressive for children that had only been playing for a couple of months. And it became such a phenomenal success story. And we were able to get all of those kids and channel them into different pipelines, where some of them went on to do tech. I know he even knows this, some of those kids worked on a project for Future Africa. And it was a success story, but it took a lot of hard work. And so what really happened here? What changed, right? I believe that, like I said earlier, one of the greatest tragedies of poverty, especially for the really young ones, is that it takes away so much from them before they have their own agency. So we're using chess not just as the end in itself, but as a means to several ends. Yes, the science, maybe the real impact is in its synapses and how, builds help cognition and all of those skills that they talk about. But I think what it really does is to help the children see their own potential. And that is the greatest gift you can ever give anyone, to know that, to help them see that they can be judged based on their own ability, not what they look like or where they're from, but by the things they have the capacity to do. And by just teaching them chess and helping them build that capacity to understand it, to learn how to solve problems, it returns that self-worth. And by just doing that, we're able to take, those teenagers from under the bridge that were doing a lot of really criminal stuff and help them see that it could be so much more. And that change in mindset is a real impact in helping, young people know that their greatest assets is their mind in the day. Thank you.
Wow, that's great. I think it's about changing the mindset of children. Um, when you take a child who's so young and you help them see the world as a place that they can conquer, I think you really do a lot to get them out of poverty. A lot of these children are from extremely poor families, and to break that cycle of poverty that's generational, it's about giving them hope and giving them a place that they can really be all that they were destined to be. And that's one of the things that we try to do in Text Foundation. When you look at our radio school program, for example, I don't know if we know of the, what we call our Almajiri children in Nigeria. I'm not sure if it's peculiar to Nigeria, but what normally happens is, people have children, and this is in the northern part of Nigeria, and they'll give the child to an Islamic scholar to help them educate the child with the Islamic education. And that's really the goal. It's not about conventional education, it's just Islamic education. The Islamic scholar then gives the child a plate and a tablet. The plate is for the child to go around begging for food on a daily basis, and the tablet is to learn Islamic education. So this child grows up believing that the only way they can sustain themselves is by begging. And to be able to change the mindset of those children, that's a big deal. And that's one of the reasons why in the second year of the program, to feed the children was something really important for us to do, so that they know that twice a week they don't have to take the plate out to beg for food. And that also keeps them coming back to the program, because really it's almost like the food is, is something that just to attract them so that they're always there. Because we believe that at the end of the year, the goal is really to get them to ignite a flame in their minds to want to learn more, so that they can then find themselves in conventional education. Now, when you look at the tech schools that we run, for those of us who schooled in Nigeria, we would remember having a teacher that would come and just regurgitate what they've memorized to the students. And as a student, you're not supposed to think, you're not supposed to ask questions, certainly not any question that's outside the topic that the teacher came prepared to discuss. And so you have a lot of children that graduate and don't really get encouraged in critical thinking, And so those are some of the things that we that's a cycle that we try to break. We specifically target children from very poor families. The schools are free, and the reason being that we want to break the cycle of poverty. In the school that we have in the north, it's an all-girls school, and there's a reason for that. One of the challenges that we have is early child marriages. So we have girls that are wedded off as early as 9 years old. I mean, these are babies. And so we put together this school that's just for girls, but in order that the parents would allow the children to attend the school, we made it an Islamic conventional education school. So when the girls come, they learn both Islam and they also learn conventional education. So that way, the parents feel comfortable to let them come. We also had the parents sign, an agreement that they would allow the girls complete the entire duration of school without, trying to get them married. The idea being that I believe that as women become more educated, they're less likely to be wedded off at such an early age, and we can actually break that cycle of poverty. So those are the things that we've done as far as Text Foundation is concerned, to try to change that mindset with children.
Thank you very much. I noticed that between the time I got off from the came that's my CEO, Carl Gabriel. The name is right, the title is right, but obviously I'm standing in and trying to put my feet in much bigger shoes than the story from both of you speaks to the fact that you actually directly get your hands dirty, involved in doing good. From my perspective, I see the bit far ahead. We put structures together, we put resources together, and we get people to go out there and do things. So when you talk about changing minds, I can approach it from an intellectual point of view, but not with the kind of story that he just told, which is so compelling. I was reading Naira Land today, and the example I can give is some gentleman on Naira Land who first-class student was going to drop out an MTN Foundation scholarship assisted, and he went to talk about it. So far, we've given 13,000 scholarships and counting, graduating people in STEM. We do education, mission scholars, all that. I would assume that those interventions at a certain level help and create and help those people meet their needs and therefore impact their needs. But for me, the intervention that we do that I particularly like is what we do with the hubs, where we bring kids together and ask them to do things to solve problems. We have entrepreneurs, very young entrepreneurs that we support. It's an interesting program because what it does is they make pitches, much like what you see on TV that I think, what do you call that thing? That Paul Omani did.
Lion's Den.
Yes, Lion's Den. They come in, they pitch, and they pitch their whatever it is they want to do. We partnered for quite a number of years with the Bank of Industry because we want it to be sustainable. What we do is we give the money to the Bank of Industry. You come make your pitch, say your proposal and all that. They get as much as 3 million naira at an interest rate of between 2 and 3%. The interest rate is really to create the discipline of knowing. So it's not just we dash you money, it's to create the discipline of knowing that there's a need and there's pressure to succeed and repay the money. And when they repay the money, 25% of the money is now given to them as a grant to scale the business. So I suspect that such things will help them become better. And if you know that you've been given money to work with and that money will be paid back and all that, you're a little bit more diligent. But like I say, the compelling stories are the stories from people like this who go out in there and can feel it and touch it. From my perspective, I sit behind the desk somewhere, and I can only intellectually engage with it.
Might pass. So, but it's still important, right? The work that you're doing, the work that you're enabling. So I wouldn't undersell, right, that from the standpoint of MTN. And I think what's important to take away from this conversation, again, is we talk a lot in our world about investing in startups and investing in companies, but all of us started out as young people, right? And so we need organizations like this working with young people to help develop and shape them, because these will be the future leaders of the world that we will live in. So really important. I want people to get ready with their questions, because we're almost done and getting ready for the next panel. But I want each of you to talk a little bit about work. Right? We don't train all of these young minds just to sit around and hang out, unfortunately. So talk a little bit about how the work that you're doing connects to the future of work. We live in a world where technology is moving faster than ever, right? We talk about how livelihoods are connected to work. You work in order to live, right? So for the very near future, we need to continue to shape young people in order to be trained and developed to actually have skills that they can use in the world. So talk a little bit about what your organization does to connect the work that you're doing to the future of work, or how you personally think about the future of work. And we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, so I mean the world is rapidly evolving, and I like to think that we're bridging that gap between traditional education, the conventional education that we've always known, and the skills that are needed, you know, for the markets of the future. And there's been like empirical research, and I speak, you know, particularly about like how chess in itself helps improve even academic outcomes. And the beautiful thing about it is that just using chess and the programs that we have, learning is experiential and practical. The children can be involved in their own learning. So it's not just the teacher interfacing with the child or back and forth. And the interesting thing, I was having a conversation on the sometime last year, and we were talking about how there's this quote that when the student is ready to learn, the teacher would appear. But with technology now, it's like when the student is ready to learn, the teacher will disappear, really, because education is going to change, and we already see that with emerging technologies, AI, and I think it's important that we can raise smarter children. We need to raise, and that is the gift that we have as a country, Nigeria. We have that human capital. We have a lot of children. If there are 20 million children out of school, and you don't think they're worth investing in, in the next 10, 20 years, you're going to have them as a huge liability. I've already seen a lot of that, fester currently. Now imagine what I would look like in a couple of decades where, the world is changing and they would never have the skills to participate in the future like that. So I think for us, we're using chess, there's the very essence of it and how our programs, there's the science of it, how it grows dendrites on both sides of the brain. And because they're still in their formative years, you have that opportunity to imprint values and lessons that will stay with them. Chess teaches abstract thinking at a very high level. I was in Finland recently, and a lot of the schools there, they've incorporated it as a part of their curriculum, that gamified learning approach. And China is doing this as well. The US is doing this. We've been doing this for 7 years, but not within the regular school system, but at community level, where we can create a community of learners in places where education is very undervalued. Because the future of work is not going to be driven by the resources that we think we have now. We will be driven by this capacity, this intellectual capacity. And I was watching this interview recently that Tim Cook gave, and he was talking about how there's a specific kind of tooling that they need to make the iPhones. And in the US, you can maybe fill a room like this with engineers that have that capacity. But if you go to China, you can fill 6 stadiums with the engineers that have that capacity, that specific engineering skill that is needed. And what has China really done differently, and how they've revolutionized that education at vocational level? I think we should begin to look towards that. And that is why I say, for us, chess is not the end in itself. There's all the cognitive benefits, but beyond that, it can be a very simple entry point into everything else, right? We've had a lot of our children that have gone on to do furniture making, that have gotten into tech. Some of those boys from Oshodiona Bridge, they've built their own e-commerce website, right? So if we can continue to rethink education beyond what is conventional, right, and to empower the children with the skill sets that will be needed for the future of work, then maybe we have a good chance of competing, because a lot of the other countries that are serious about this, they're investing in it. So I think we're playing our own part by using chess because it is low cost and simple entry as well. But on a final note, our children are worth investing in, and the greatest investment we can make at this fundamental level, I mean, the entrepreneurs will be there building the software that is needed, is to prepare our children to be able to participate in that future. And if they can't, they would have a liability on their hands.
Thank you. Yeah, technology. So all our schools are based on science, technology, engineering, arts, and math methodologies. And so we have interactive boards in all the schools that the children are able to use, and the teacher can take a step back. All our teachers are trained in pedagogy method of teaching, so it's not about transferring information to the children, but it's more about just serving as a facilitator whilst the child is encouraged to think critically and those sorts of things. Like I said earlier, the children learn coding, which I think it's important to learn at a young age, because it helps to expand their brain, it helps them with critical thinking, and it just helps them to be able to think about things in a different way. One of the things that we noticed was that a lot of parents would want to pull their children out of school in elementary 5 to secondary school, and so they don't stay that additional year. So what we did was to convert the elementary six into a skill-based year, where the child is actually able to learn different types of skills. And so the children find it interesting. So now there's a reason to stay back for a year, because suddenly you're going to learn photography, you're going to learn public speaking, you're going to learn, more technological skills, carpentry, those sorts of things. And maybe now we have to add chess to it too. And so that way, children are actually encouraged to spend an extra year. And I think that year is important because it helps the children think beyond just being a lawyer or a doctor. Because suddenly they're able to see that there's so many other professions that they could actually aspire to get into. In the school in Sokoto, because maternal poverty is so rampant in the north, what we've actually done in that school is to have a skill center for the mothers, where we teach them sewing, we teach them sewing, cooking, and computer skills as well. Because obviously, there's a saying that if you educate a woman, you've educated an entire village. And we believe that by educating the mothers, that it would also ensure that the girls, that they see value in educating the girls as well. So that's as far as sex is concerned. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll talk about work from a point of view of what we do, and then from the point of view of what I think we are achieving. First and foremost, I work for a communications company, which is, in Nigeria, this is a social overhead capital right now. When the government talks about the digital economy and everything that we need to achieve as an opportunity to lead from, we enable that. And for us, that is almost education. Anything that will assist us in achieving that, we go out of our way to try to, essentially because we see it as an investment. Ultimately, if the people are doing well, they are making more money, they will use our services. And therefore, it's a virtual circle that everybody benefits from. And before I continue, let me acknowledge the presence of the DJ of NIMS, whose organization probably sits towards enabling one of the most critical infrastructure, soft infrastructure we will need if the digital economy is going to work, which is identity. So from that perspective, we go out every day, we try. I just mentioned that the foundation, we are pivoting, trying to get to digital skills for digital work. Essentially, educating people, doing whatever, like you said, it's so that they can make a living and become less of a problem, less crime, everybody's here, we're all progress. That's the essence of it. From an intervention point of view, aside from the digital skills that we are trying to get people and the scholarships and all that, we're doing maybe not enough yet, but we're bringing in interns, graduate interns. In actual fact, in my own division, some of the smartest people we have are young people who came in through the graduate internship program. This is a program where very smart young children, first class, second class students, I didn't have any of those, I've never had maybe. But they bring them in, they train them across Africa, across the MTN footprint, and they are brought into the business, and not at entry level, but at a slightly higher level. And their progress, depending on performance, is accelerated. So you have such people coming. Maybe I just asked, I requested my nephew, he works at Google, to come. I just spoke to, chatted with whether he can talk. He got a scholarship, came to this place, went to school at Tufts University. In his third year, Google hired him. In his third year. So we're trying to do something like that. We're trying to create those opportunities where, as a young person, if you're good at what you do, an MTN can absorb you. And it helps everybody. It helps the child and it helps MTN. Like when he was talking about chess and talking about incidental, I can barely play that. But when he was talking about it and talking about critical thinking, I was saying to myself, okay, there might be an opportunity here. there might be people he has trained up who have left the street and who have maybe gone into formal education that we should be looking at to say, how do we bring them in? If not directly into our offices, our verticals, our ecosystem, how do we help them find jobs? Because it's not just about educating, it's about educating folks. At the end of the day, it has to contribute to help us build this beautiful country that we all.
All right, that sounds good. So, great remarks. I mean, I think the takeaway for me there, and I think for all of us, really is that connectivity between, right? The training, the skills, and actual work. It's not enough to just have a training program. It's not enough to just be a charitable organization, but how are you actually connecting the work that you're doing towards skills that are actually going to create jobs or connect young people to jobs in the future? Part of what we're doing with the launch of the Future Africa Foundation is really trying to help bring in philanthropic capital to organizations like this. Again, we talk a lot about obviously investing, but if we don't develop the young people, we won't continue to have the entrepreneurs creating the great businesses into the future. So with the foundation and the launch that we have today, part of what we're doing is creating vehicles, especially targeting diasporans that are interested in finding ways to connect with initiatives like these two, finding ways to actually bring their money back home. What's interesting about the way that we're doing this is you actually have a way of investing or granting dollars to multiple organizations. You can grow that money that you have in your accounts, tax deferred, you can continue to grow it over time. You can invest in multiple initiatives. For anybody who's interested, you can definitely reach out and we can talk a little bit more about exactly how to do that. But one thing that's challenging about investing sometimes is the accreditation. Right? It's difficult. It might not be accredited. You might want to find a way to participate. So in addition to granting to organizations like this, you can also participate in things like our Accelerator as an example. So we've created a way through our foundation to allow you to be able to do that. So granting and donating to organizations like this, but also to programs like our Accelerator. With that, I wanted to open up with one or two questions before we move on to the next panel. Any questions? Okay, all right. Give everybody a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for our panelists, and of course to TM moderating. Sorry, can panelists just stay back for a second? Quick photo break. Just capture the moment, please. Here, can you join in? Someone is specific. Thank you again. I think we've all been inspired. Great stories. What's going on? So right now, I feel in between all the speed meeting that's supposed to be happening here, but I think we still have another very important conversation to have. So I'm going to invite to the front, holding the stage, the we're just reorganizing this space and get into this next financial. Yeah, this is just one of the tech setup, right? Okay, so let's get started. I want to invite to grab a seat here in front. Please, round of applause for him. We also have, of course, Goodman. Goodman also will be part of this. And join. Goodman, you're coming back, right? Okay. Then we have Shayo Olumide, Associate Vice President, Investments. and Technology at the AFC. Round of applause for him. Of course, he'll be talking a little more about what they've enabled with this commitment. And then we have, last but not least, Trish Thomas, Executive Director at EEGF, which is Empowering Economic Growth Foundation. Okay, couldn't remember that. Okay, so let's get right into it. So we've been inspired by all philanthropy and the huge impact they've all been making. But now we want to look a little further down to see what potentially we're creating with some of these investments and what Africa can potentially become in the next 100 years. So we look back to good forward, and maybe you want to kick this off for us. The digital divide that I think many of these investors are trying to address. Just want to hear your high-level thinking about where all that is headed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Okay, this is a really important panel. We all had a lot of fun earlier listening to the panel. As many people as possible, if you can come down to the front and sit down, you'll be able to hear us better. I know there were challenges with the sound earlier, but we fixed them, and now you can see us and hear us, right? Right? If you can hear me in the back, just woo! Okay, thank you. I just had to do that quickly. Okay, so for me, I mean, I've been part of the ecosystem for the last 10 years. I was at an event last week Friday with Honorable Minister of Digital Economy, and I was remarking on how to this month, almost exactly 10 years ago, that we launched Mandela just off the street, and during the UNGA. I remember Camilo Anthony showing up there, and I was joking that at that time, I came with my mother. This time, I came with my wife. Just to give you a sense of how long 10 years is. And when I reflect on that journey, I think, 10 years, and it's remarkable what we've been able to build and what has been accomplished over that 10 years. And I could never have imagined that the end result will be tens of billions of dollars in investments, 2 unicorns, or 3 or 7, or, none of these outcomes were anything like what I imagined. But here we are. And when I think about the incredible privilege of having lived through those 10 years and all the friends that we've managed to make, many of whom are in this room over those 10 years, I'm especially inspired about what is possible over the next 100 years. Because at the time I was coming into the ecosystem with Mandela, we didn't have technology talent that was being paid a fair wage for what they were doing. Not to talk of technology talent that come from Nigeria, serve the global economy. But we do know. At that time, the only tech hub that you could talk about was CC Hub. And then CC Hub was one floor. One floor, literally the 6th floor. And so all of us who grew up in this tech ecosystem, we started from one floor in Yaba. And now today, I don't think you could fit the tech ecosystem on one floor. I remember one time we have this party in Lagos we call Oya Make with Roof. We actually tried to put everybody in like a fairly big place, and we couldn't fit. So you can't fit the ecosystem on one floor. Finally, last year, a watershed moment for me personally was perhaps one of the most, and I say this with full apologies to all the government people, perhaps one of the most hostile governments for tech in the last administration. We still managed to pass the Nigerian Startup Act. It was like a miracle. This was an administration where we didn't have anybody that was from our community. Quite frankly, it was very tough to do business in Nigeria. We were growing in spite of all the challenges, and we still managed to pass by far one of the widest, most groundbreaking legislations ever for impacting it. And there are some people who were here before who were part of that in the presidency. And I look at where we are now. You know, billions of dollars later, many hubs later, even the UN is doing hubs in Nigeria now. And, you know, we not only have the ability to pass groundbreaking policy, we have the minister. And I wonder what is possible over the next 100 years if we play it right. And I think that's one of the things that really inspires the work that I do today, which is a lot of what's on this panel. And for me, my new assignment, you know, I'm kind of past the age where I can hop on planes and work 18-hour days to build unicorns. So now I'm going to try and help the next generation to do that. But I think what's important about this time, and that's what makes the conversation with Itana and EFT very important, is that, for God's sake, I'm not going to do this again for somebody else to own it. I've done that before, right? At the end of the day, you know, we built what we built and we learned a lot, and we're very grateful to Silicon Valley and New York for funding all our unicorns. But when we build the next set of unicorns, I really want them to be Nigerian, not just in name and founders, but also in incorporation, right? When we build the next unicorns, I want them to be able to scale and have campuses, not just be remote companies sitting in somebody's living room. When we build the next unicorns, I want them to actually be situated and incorporated in Nigeria and have the full complements of the Nigerian government support, because they're in an environment where that support can be sought and given. And that is what is informing quite a bit of what we're on. So we're building YC. You know, my brother here, my friend. Well, we're building the YC. He's building the Delaware, and we're hoping that AFC will be our Silicon Valley Bank, which will never go down. But the big idea basically is, how do we actually look ahead? Now we know it's possible. That's no longer in doubt. If anybody doubts us, we got a rap sheet to give you, right? Of companies that we built over the last 10 years that can deliver. But if we're building all of this again, what are we going to do differently? That's the big idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great, powerful energy there. And so you've given us the history lesson. So let's take this forward now with Lukman. So Lukman, what you're doing obviously can be so transformational. And I just wanted you to now project into what you think that 100 years can be. We've seen that it is possible. So tell us what you think.
So what the next 100 years could be. So I think he has touched on a lot of that. And he said, right, it's about the African startup ecosystem has grown, right? We're seeing startups now provide services worldwide, right? Before now, all of our startup companies, right, as he said, right, by name, are actually Delaware companies, paying tax to the American governments, right? And what we want to do here is, like I said, now we're being financed by Africa, and we want our startups to be able to feel safe at home, and we want the investors to be able to feel safe investing in Nigerian startups, right? Where our companies can grow and scale from Africa, and as AFPT, Africa is the biggest free zone, right? Where right now, as we know, right, that we saw statistics in Gavin, where African companies trade more outside Africa than in Africa, right? Where we're not talking to ourselves, we're not providing support to ourselves, we're not trading, we don't have any information on what we're doing across borders, right? So Africa, as I see, is one big country, right? And what we need to do is to be able to enable startups to be able to scale, right? Provide services across borders, right? And become unicorns in Africa, right? And that is what we are trying to do here. Enable more global investment into Africa, right? And I think that is essentially what we are trying to do. And I think that is the biggest impact we can do to the tech ecosystem in our generation.
Come right back to you because earlier you did say you will say more about Tana, so this is the moment. So maybe I can reframe that question a little bit and give us your perspective on what Tana is going to enable over the next 2 years. So what is this enabling you to? And then also combining that with the fact that we now have African capital backing.
So Nigeria is the biggest market in Africa, right? So it makes sense that we start with Africa. Let's start with Nigeria, I'm sorry. So what we're doing with Itana is enabling global firms to be able to enter the Nigerian market, right? Incorporate your business, open your bank accounts, we help you your immigration, your work permits, and all of that, right? So bring FDI into Nigeria. It's a one-stop shop, so this is almost like a Delaware and Africa play combined into one. Can you guys hear me? Sorry. Yeah, it's like an AFC and Delaware and Silicon Valley company. Why? Because these are the challenges that tech companies face, right? The infrastructure, the policy, and community. So we're starting with Nigeria, right? That we're allowing Nigerian startups scale and global money coming to Nigeria. But 100 years from now, we see this as a decentralized project, right? Where we want to be able to partner with other countries, right? In a way where you can set up an entity in Nigeria, right? And provide services with that entity, get licenses in other countries across Africa, right? We want to build infrastructure not just in Nigeria, but also build infrastructure in South Africa, Ghana, and see the city connected by technology and not by land, right? So connect the community by minds, right? And not about where they physically are, right? We're all one family, right? So Itana isn't a Nigerian project, it's an Africa play, right? But obviously it makes sense we start from Nigeria and build this decentralized city of districts all across Africa, and a community and tech companies all working together, hosted in other countries, and providing services to markets across Africa.
So we have one market, Africa, and Tana is going to help us make that happen. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to come to the audience real quick if you do have questions. So I want to give you the opportunity. I think we have some people that are enthusiastic about what's happening here. But I want to come to the AFC first to hear a little bit about what this investment means for you and what you're seeing, because you're clearly backing it, and I imagine that you'll catalyze a little more investments.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So to just give you some background to who AFC is, we are a multinational, similar to sort of the IFC or the African Development Bank. So, we're set up by a treaty of sovereign states, and our focus is to catalyze investments into Africa. We are African-owned, and we are run by Africans. All of our capital is from Africa, and all of our capital goes towards Africa. In doing that, like we all know, Africa has a large infrastructure deficit. By some estimates, it's roughly $99 billion a year. And we feel like African capital is what we need to have accelerate that infrastructure deficit. Now, we focus on priority sectors, so things like powering Africa, providing the transportation, connecting Africa, digital infrastructure, and industrializing Africa. So where this fits in with the Itana story specifically is we've invested a lot in the brick and mortars, the railways, the things that enable the digital services to grow. We've invested in fiber cable, we've invested in data centers, we've invested in terrestrial fiber and tower companies. The demand on the services that we're creating, or the infrastructure that we're creating, is built on digital services. And the growth of digital services is what's really going to be pushing or assisting in closing the infrastructure. So ecosystems like Itana are going to be bringing in VCs and accelerators, tech companies, tech talents into one community where they can all learn and develop the next unicorns as E and Lukman have mentioned. So for us, being able to support something that can accelerate social economic impact is why we decided to invest in Itana.
I think that deserves a round of applause. Because it really is something real big, I think. All right, so I'm coming to you. You are also making your foray into the African continent, so perhaps a good place to start is hear your experience. And we are talking 100 years. We know Africa has so many huge challenges, everything from education to food security. So maybe you can speak to what you're seeing in terms of potential of African population.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, EEGF is Empowering Economic Growth Foundation. And what we're really focused on doing is finding transformational entrepreneurs that are going to build businesses that, like E was saying, are going to carry the continent for the next 100 years. So these are for-profit businesses that we want to support not only through capital, but also through development, education, connectivity to a community and partners, and all the elements that they need, all the resources and assets and people that they need to really elevate their enterprises to the next level. We're looking for people that are solving problems, bringing real value to their communities, that are creating jobs. We've touched on that stable work that provides a living wage is critical to taking the whole economy forward. And also that are providing pathways out of poverty or opportunity for underprivileged communities that are kind of being left out from the current economy. So we've been really lucky to have a great increase in our endowment recently, and we're looking forward to deploying some new investment strategies that involve things beyond grants. We touched in our first panel on the power of philanthropic giving. And not to negate that, a lot of these companies need loans on reasonable terms, which we know in Africa right now is really hard to come by. They need equity investment that's not onerous, that's not going to pull ownership of the company out of Nigeria, Ghana, wherever they're based. So we're trying to take a leadership role in facilitating some of those creative access to capital solutions that are going to enable these businesses to really power the economy for the next 100 years.
And maybe you can briefly share your experience so far in terms of type of investments.
Absolutely. So EEGF really started in 2019 with the formation of Cascader, which is an accelerator program. It's kind of a sister program to Accelerate Africa, for those of you who know that accelerator. So like them, we're looking for these transformational leaders. We take them through a really robust 8-week course where they're getting access to education. They're meeting people they would never have an opportunity to connect with otherwise. And they're getting really deep advice that's targeted to take their business to the next level. From Cascader, we built this pool of alumni over the last 6 years. We actually have our 6th cohort going right now, which is really exciting. And we're excited about supporting them over time. So I think one of the unique things about Cascader and now EEGF's ability to continue this relationship with these founders for years, for decades, is that we're really looking for people that want to effect change in the world. And whether it's through the venture that brings them into Cascader, or future ventures, or their own mentorship, philanthropic efforts, and things that they may do in the future, that these are really leaders that are going to be active on the continent for many, many years to come. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about, is this longevity of relationship with founders that have the ability to make change.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I want to take this to the audience. If we do have questions at this time, you can just by raising your hand. As you can see, we do have just one microphone, so I'll just bring it to you. And please introduce yourself and pose your question.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Tygo, or Google Short. Great job. I'm a investment analyst at a venture debt company based out of Coachella Valley called Western Technology Investment. So my question is, okay, can you guys hear me better? Yeah. Start over? Okay. So I guess my question for you guys is that I'm so far you've been very successful with garnering government support to building what you've built so far. But it seems like it's still like a uphill battle to really have a good relationship with the government to then expand and really create this, help you realize this vision. And so my question is, as you continue to build and I guess really do this, build, I guess, in respect of the government, much of government support, do you have any plans to, like, what is the solution to kind of, I guess, should I say, lobby the other side, the government, to really help you push this Itana and really help you realize and the full vision and what it to be? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great question because, to be honest, one of my biggest challenges with the next American is the government. Have some really dysfunctional governments, and you still need the government to get the permits, the regulations, the laws, the ports. So even though we are trying to build a digital economy here, how do we overcome all of that? Maybe we can learn from you. Tell us.
So yeah, I think I'm not naturally a technician. So I've worked a lot with government. So I think this project, we actually had very little resistance in building this project because from the get-go, we took this as a collaborative approach with government, right? Where this is a project that does bring value to the Nigerian government, right? We're creating employment, we're bringing tax revenue to Nigeria, right? We're bringing FDI into the country, right? So I think it's really important that when we embark on projects like this, right, you carry the government along from the beginning, right? And you make sure that the shared interest from the get-go. So you're not just looking at your interest, you have a shared interest from the get-go, because the only way something like this is sustainable is if everybody is benefiting from it. You understand? So that's the first part, right? That's when I say I'm not a tech person, right? Because this is something that I think a lot of tech startups in Nigeria don't get right from the beginning, right? They look at it from their perspective and not really seeing how it impacts government or how the government is benefiting from this, right? So what we did was, as part of Itana, right, we have a non-profit advocacy group called DIVSIN. And that vehicle is a partnership with AFC, PwC, Charter City, Future Africa. And we have a whole lot of consultants from around the world. And that vehicle was specifically developed for engaging government and policy advocacy, right? And the narration we use, right, when we speak to government from that vehicle, is from their perspective, right, how this is beneficial to the Nigerian government. Let me tell you how much support we have. We actually have a presidential steering committee chaired by the president of Nigeria himself, right? Who is sitting on this board, on this committee, to ensure that this works. He brought in everyone. We have the ministers, the CBN governors, the tax, and so what's it called? That's the first part, right? Where we are lucky to have a proactive government that is interested in these kind of things, that is interested in the progress in Nigeria. But apart from that, government change. Right? One of the biggest worries now, okay, fine, this government is here, what is the next government going to do, and things like that. Right? So it's important that while we have this window, we're making sure that we are building, we are establishing the strongest laws to protect this project, right? So we're amending the act, right? And this is a 30-year-old act that bigger investments actually are backed under. The Dangote $20 billion project is under the same law we are running. The Nigerian Lekki Seaport, so bigger investments are happening on the backing of the law that we're also working on, right? And we're making sure that we work with them. So when we talk to the policy, they are actually navigating how to optimize it. Make this. So I'm saying that don't just believe it's going to happen, right? But then the approach you take with government is really important. right? Which is a collaborative joint venture, as opposed to doing it for us.
There's a reason why when I was looking for who would co-found the project with me, I had to find the government whisperer. Because throughout my 10-year journey, I'll tell you, whenever I got to my wit's end and I needed to make that one phone call to somebody who could sort out government across 3 administrations now, that last phone call was Lukman's number. I'll be like, I mean, Yoruba, where are you? Because I have problems. And he's always been amazing about helping me. The biggest thing I've learned on this journey with Lukman and from Lukman in particular, and some of my friends that are in government, including 2 or 2 in the crowd, and many of them, there are so many of them that are in this room, is that government actually wants the same thing as we do. The leaders in government are actually trying to make things work. But the reality is, for example, if you take Nigeria as an example, Nigeria is a democracy, which means that the interests of one smart person do not matter more than the votes of 100 people that may be differently inclined. I didn't say they are not smart. I'm just saying they may not be inclined to agree with you 100% of the time. And especially when we as middle class, yuppie, smart kids, educated abroad show up, we sort of show up expecting our needs and interests to be prioritized over the needs of the vast majority of the country, whose needs are actually a lot simpler, right? They just want food on their table, they want a job, they don't need it to be a tech job, right? They want to be safe. They don't have the kind of high-sounding things. They don't need dollar funding, right? So as a politician whose job is ultimately to win elections, I started to learn that actually if I was in this guy's shoes, I really should tell these tech people to GTFO out of my office. That changed my perspective. And I started to think like that. What are they trying to achieve? What are their roadblocks? And how can the project that we're bringing to them help? But I also started to think more strategically about the context in which we have to present these things. For example, we're using a 30-year-old law as opposed to saying, come and start a new law. Why? It's a lot easier to change a 30-year-old law than it is for us to put in a new one. Second of all, we are using the same law that who is going to solve everybody's power problem is using. So we know that if they won't go after Dangote and the same law applies to us, then they won't what? They won't go after us, right? So third thing, within the context of the free zone, we are able to make rules for ourselves. And that's very important because the reality is that many of the rules and benefits that we will enjoy as a result of this, it's important, but it also has the capacity to completely drain governance of its own potential revenue sources. So it's a tool that has to be applied very specifically and tactically. So, and also, our industry is fast changing. Maybe this year the issue is tax breaks and immigration. Maybe next year it's regulation about AI. And we need to move faster than our National Assembly, which is comprised mostly of people who don't know anything about tech and do not care, and our ministries and our $400 billion economy has to manage. So we cannot move at the country's speed. So by being contained in this digital economic zone, we can make rules that are in tune much faster than we would otherwise. So I think it's the combination of being extremely strategic, right, and putting yourself in the shoes of a government that doesn't just serve you, but actually has maybe a greater obligation to people who are not as privileged as you are. And then finally, having somebody like Lukman, who can explain government perspective to me, and who I can explain the technology guy's perspective to, and finding the middle ground that actually makes it work. And we've survived one government, and I would have a very tough government. I think we survived Buhari, so we can survive anything. So I'm very excited about what it is possible for us to accomplish with this partnership. And I think there's a model here for the tech companies, which is just having a little bit of humility, recognizing that you're not the most important thing in the country, and actually taking your time to understand the perspective of the other side.
I think you wrapped it up very well at the end of it. So you've got to be smart, you've got to be diplomatic, you've got to listen, you've got to calm down to the level of the people you're interacting with. I want to hear from government agencies. So, actually, she didn't want to chat, so I'll just give it over to her. That's the Director General of Nigeria, and then my recognition. Please put your hands together for her. They're also supporting us.
Good evening, everyone. Especially when he said that we can survive anything. I was just looking at him. Okay, first and foremost, I came here with a speech prepared, but I really love the conversations. I think that one of the most important things is that the most honest conversations I had in very small sentences like this. And I will, say something that's very interesting, which is, when he spoke about governments in Africa. So I will start from the African perspective. And what I have realized is that when you look at instances across Africa where you've got low income countries and middle income countries, the first and foremost thing is that there is a lack of infrastructure. So how do we address those issues? Okay. There's a huge digital divide. How do we address those issues? So I'll give you an example when you look, and I'm going to speak from the identity perspective, when you look at ADA, the ADA solution from India. India was able to electrify its last village in 2013. But for them to be able to obviously ensure that they're able to put the most important thing, which is the basic access to internet connectivity, that it's laying the infrastructure, the fiber infrastructure, you have to make sure that you have electricity. Right? So this now brings us all the way back to sustainable renewable energy, etc. Moving on from that, how I would really summarize all the points that you said is for you to be able to actually thrive across Africa. We all know that Africa has a great potential. The world knows it. Everybody sees it. Africans see it. So what exactly is the problem? And this is what we need to talk about. What's the government perspective? We need political will from the government. Okay, that's one. You need commitment from the government. The good news about Nigeria now is that you have a president for the first time that is very, very intentional about bridging that digital divide. And this was one of the reasons why he signed into law the Data Protection Act last year, 2023. I think shortly after when he got into office. So what I would really say to that is that from Nigeria, you have the political will, you have the commitment. But I'll give you an instance. Nigeria has the largest database. We've got about 110,890 million people registered. Okay? And, 110,890,260 million people registered. And that's a good number. That's the largest database in Africa. And we're the ones setting the tone for the rest of Africa. But what I've also realized is that people like South Sudan that just obviously broke off and came out of a war, they have a lot of challenges. So when you're talking to them about digital identity systems and digital public infrastructure, where do they start? So first of all, they have to create their own laws, and not their own laws, their own laws making anything. And you cannot build policies if you're not going to any existing laws, because they're basically a new country, right? So then they have obviously all of those challenges. And if you look at instances like Nigeria, I would use my own Commission as an example. The law enacted backing the digital identity and digital public infrastructure in Nigeria was done last in 2007. And we're in 2024. So you can imagine that there is a huge gap. So you have to obviously review those laws to be able to move forward. Okay? And then you have the challenges like you mentioned, the National Assembly, and you have people there that don't really understand technology. So how do you get forward from that? So I would say the third thing is ensuring that you have the strong laws in place for you to be able to move forward. And then anything that you do, you must ensure that you have the people at the core of it. So if you're talking about digital public infrastructure, you're talking about identity, payments, and data exchange layers. You have to ensure that digital rights of the citizens are protected, which is very, very, very important. So you also need to make sure that there's accessibility. You know, you also need to make sure that the solutions being built are inexpensive. That is one of the biggest problems that we have because we always find ourselves in very wrong-team positions. So a country like South Sudan has shown something. They don't have any money. How are you going to provide a legal identity for every single citizen that they have? And you know, and this is supposed to be in line with the UN SDG Code 16.9 that no one must be left behind. You must provide a legal identity for all. Where are they going to start from? So this is where we come in to see, okay, how can we help them scale? Okay? And that's very, very, very important. Nigeria is the one setting the tone. And how do we help them? Even in Nigeria, now going back to the local context, right? We're talking about a little bit about Africa, so let's talk about Nigeria. I will tell you that we have some very good success stories in the case of the Nigerian Immigration Service, now uses the verifiable set of records community to issue new passports and also for renewal of passports. Secondly, the student loans for the first time have been made possible in Nigeria, and that's because you have a verifiable set of identity records, so which means that we are able to save government money by ensuring that we don't have both beneficiaries to the student loans, and we're able to track and say, okay, X, Y, Z did apply for this using their NIN able to verify their identity. We have that. We're also working with the credit credit facility on that. And we're also working with the tax. We've just actually completed the tax identification number linkage to the NIN. And we're going live in about 2 weeks from now. And so we have like a lot of examples, success stories, especially with the Ministry of Agriculture around the farmers. So we have a lot of things that we're working on, okay? But I'll tell you some of the challenges that we have. We have a lot of fragmented databases across. So you have databases in silos. So you need to be able to get them to integrate with our identity database. But then you find out that only a few or a handful of these MDAs can actually integrate. Because a lot of them don't even have scalable systems for this. They don't have any technology that's sort of modular, built in a modular way. So it's not a plug and play situation. So we are there trying to see how we can help them scale up to our standards so that they're able to integrate easily with us. So this is just a small snapshot. And I'm glad that MTN was here earlier because we've partnered with MTN and we've done quite a lot in terms of verification and authentication from the private sector. All the banks are doing it. So they're using their name records to obviously verify the identities of people that open bank accounts, etc., and other multiple services across. So this just gives you a snapshot of what we're, of what we're going through, what we've been. So just wanted to just throw that in there. Sorry for
Thank you very much. Yeah, back there. So let's go there. If you can make it really concise, we appreciate it.
Hi everyone, my name is Dava Oruwari from New York City. I live in the Bronx, Nigeria. Nigeria. I work at a called Summer Health. It's a Series A stage health tech company. I'm in a Gazette/student platform. Speaking of, okay. I work at Summer Health, which is a Series A stage health tech company. I am a biz ops associate / chief of staff, so experiencing a lot of functions of the business. So my question is around kind of the dependency of Western capital for the success of the continent. It seems like there's a clear interest in keeping the success of Africa like in itself. But there's still a reliance on the West for funding. How do we expect the continent to thrive on its own when we rely on Western capital to fund all the opportunities?
It's a great question. We're looking 100 years into the future.
Let me take that one. So look, I'll be very quick. So look, ultimately we will always depend on Western capital. We don't print dollars in Africa. So we need their dollars, we need their euros. But what we can do in Africa is learn from the past, start creating value in the continent with the capital that we're getting from offshore. Let me give you a practical example here. Guinea is has the largest reserves of bauxite in the world, but produces less aluminium, 10 times less aluminium than Australia. An even more practical example, the $5 Starbucks coffee, 10 cents of that goes to the local farmer in Abisoye. So what Africa needs to do is value creation on the continent. We need to beneficiate. So we need to create value for the resources that we produce, which will enable us to have economic prosperity, and it will enable us to be able to, one, reduce the cost of debt that we're bringing in, and also it will enable us to start exporting finished products, and will then ultimately increase our earning capacity. So yeah, we'll always need dollars, don't worry about that.
I don't know about that too. I don't know what's. Well, I think one of the biggest myths actually in development, with all due respect, is this idea of Western dependence on Africa's dependence on Western dollars. Because if you actually look at FDI contributions over the years, remittances have actually remained the largest contributor to the continent's development over the last 20, actually more than 20 years, maybe like over a trend of 7 years. You'd actually find that for more than half of that period, remittances contribute far more to Africa than any kind of ODA or FDI program. The challenge is the remittances are fragmented, right? And they don't actually go into productive purposes. They're purely consumption driven. So what happens is I'm sure your mom or your dad or you send money back home to relatives you have in Nigeria, and you think that those dollars are actually going to buy food or whatever in Nigeria. Well, the reality of what's happening is some really smart Federal Reserve guy is just accumulating those dollars, and then they take a fraction of it, which have accrued interest, and direct it to ODA, which is why ODA will never end, right? And then the bulk of those dollars are actually used to import stuff Africa can actually make. And that is where your money goes. Where we need to go, and I say this because when I started our fund, so our fund is, our current fund is American backed. I mean, we have fantastic American investors. But before I got to the point where I could get American investors, all my capital came from Africa. The vast majority of it. My last fund, 60% of our capital came from Africans in diaspora or Africans in Nigeria. And we're probably one of the best performing pre-seed stage funds on the continent. So I say this to say that there's nothing wrong with taking outside money, but I think it's important for you to understand what you contribute and how, and what is actually stopping that money from seeing the impact you want to see, which is that Nigerians and Africans in diaspora are extremely disorganized about how they actually contribute capital to the continent. That is the core problem. If they aggregated their dollars by leveraging instruments like other communities do, like 501c3 foundations, and actually getting a tax receipt for every dollar you give back, that's what Israel does, right? If we actually pull together investment entities, right, that generated returns that could then be given to the continent or proposed to investment on the continent, that's what Rothschild does, that's what half of Wall Street does. then you'll be able to see those returns on both sides. But until that happens, the reality is that we will continue to be tricked by media to believe that we will always be dependent on Western capital. But I can assure you, the moment we get organized with the capital, with our capital, we will not need Western capital. Thank you.
All right. Let me go there.
Unfortunately, because we really want you guys to connect, this might be the last one, but
thank you very much. Just a quick one to say thank you to all the panelists. I think it's fantastic that we had the opportunity to hear from you and see what is actually going on. Brief introduction, my name is Shay Weber, engineer, renewable energy technologist. It'd be interesting to know what Itana is doing now. I mean, we mentioned in terms of the infrastructure and actually solving that gap for people within the free trade zone. But it'd be interesting to know what Itana is doing just in terms of sort of sustainability and actually more renewable energy and actually how that's going to power the free trade zone and what your plans are for that. Because obviously, if we're looking over for the next 100 years, we want to have less dependency on sort of fossil fuels, a better dependency on sort of renewable sustainable energy.
thank you for that. And before you respond, someone has spoken into my ear that we haven't touched the issue of research institutions and capacity on the continent. Maybe as you respond to this last question, you can also speak to that.
Okay, so that's a really good question. Still very early stages on the infrastructure projects, but we are aware districts be eco-friendly. We will be looking for renewable energy to power, right? We will literally just got the fleets here, right? Right. And where we are now, but it's definitely where we are now is that we are now going to a master plan stage, right? So part of the requirements that took on to get MFC was to make sure that everything we do is eco-friendly, tech-driven. So there's not much for me to say about that, but just the promise that we will be.
Shai, did you want to say something about maybe your carbon markets? Because you guys are a leader there. Okay, well, the good thing is our major investor, AFC, has a reputation for being green. So you don't have to worry about us using fossil fuels. But I want to talk about the research side because this is one area where Accelerate is distinguishing itself. So the way we typically think about research, particularly in the West, is, some crazy scientist in a university is going to put his head down for 100 years and invent the next nuclear fission, whatever, and spend billions of dollars. It's not going to work that way in Africa. Sorry, it's just not. Because we don't have $1 billion born trying to build nuclear fission. We don't have it, right? And the way we think about these things is slightly different at Accelerate, which is we hunt for problems. And we turn those problems to billion-dollar opportunities. That's our track record as Future Africa. That's the DNA we bring to Accelerate Africa. Only because they're not ready to announce yet. We're working with $1 billion corporation to build a version of Accelerate that's going to be not in Lagos, sorry to us, but in a small town where we're literally researching next generation solutions to cybernetics. But it's not mad scientist research. It's practical problems they face every day with powering their stations, with leveraging their stations to create new kinds of value, with connecting Internet of Things. Real life problems, solutions that can be used tomorrow. And what we want to do, because we know we don't have the mad scientists, is be the place where the mad scientists can use us and our country, and particularly Lagos, Nigeria, as their jungle lab. I can say jungle lab. Maybe most people can't. What is jungle lab? In Lagos alone, and I think though it's sad, which is great, it's great for me, but sad for the world, that the world is missing out on Lagos. Because Lagos is a $120 billion market compacted in a 40 square meter space. Literally, Yaba to Lekki Phase 1, easily $70 billion. that you're driving past with all that traffic, right? Of actual real core value that the world never gets to understand or see. Because most people expect most innovations to happen in junk labs. But most of it is happening in Lagos. And our job is basically to help people get route to market and take that amazing research technology from whatever lab that the US has funded into market as fast as possible so it can solve problems tomorrow. That's our vision of how we will do research on the continent. We're not going to do mad scientist research. We're going to leave it for the countries that can afford it. But when it comes to how does world-class, bleeding-edge technology that has real utility on the ground get into the market, what you're going to find over the next 100 years is Accelerate Africa will be the leader there. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing people who are reinventing battery swap technology for three-wheelers. We're seeing people who are rethinking electric chargers, right? Making them more efficient so that people can use it. And maybe the technology is being built in Stanford, and maybe that technology is being built, somewhere in China. But you know where it's going to find its biggest application? Lagos, Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I know many of us still have questions, but they are still here, and we want to make sure that not everyone leaves before you can connect with them. So I want you to please put your hands together again for our panel. And I encourage you to please connect with them right after this. We'll take a quick photograph and then I'll hand over to me to
It's a formality because for me to be here, if I know what experience is like. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who made this possible. This is our second edition. Let's see if there will be a third. But first of all, I want to thank Lukman, AFC, and the team at Itana for being supporters of this. I want to thank our DG, Lindsay. Thank you so much for your partnership and for gracing us with your presence. I want to thank UNGA. Thank you so much for being supporters of Nigerian entrepreneurship. We're very grateful for you. I want to thank the Lagos State Government and the Commissioner for Science and Technology for being such a big supporter. And finally, I want to thank MTN for also helping us out and showing up and being there. And finally, I want to thank our amazing team at Future Africa who made all of this possible, and the amazing team at this venue, and those who have been taking telling our story. They've been taking the pictures and everything, and you see them online. Thank you so much for being with us, and we hope you continue to mingle